once again, David and Nathan Zellner.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, where to begin? I mean, I think one thing is that probably, I was curious actually, thinking tonight, how many, for how many people here in this packed house is this the first Zellner Brothers movie that you've seen?
Everyone.
So, I mean, it is interesting because I think one of the phenomenons at Sundance this year was that a lot of people really discovered you guys through this movie, even though you've even been to Sundance before, and this is, in fact, your 5th feature film in the last 17 years. So there's a considerable body of work and a lot of shorts and other odds and ends. But talk a little bit about the origins of this movie, because this is something that you also were trying to make for a long time, for more than a decade.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, just a quick history of Nathan, my brother and I. We made right out of college. We made we wanting to be a Robert Rodriguez or Kevin Smith. We put all our money into a 16mm feature in the late '90s, and thinking like, okay, you make the feature, it's done, and then you're in Sundance, and then you're 22 and making Hollywood features or something, and then it doesn't get into any festival, and no one wants to see it, and it's a big wake up call. And then we
call it a learning experience.
Learning experience. Well, then we went and made another feature, which is even less accessible than the first one because it's in a fake foreign language, and it's all subtitled. But we were just kind of like in a funk after the first one not going anywhere, and we were watching lots of 1960s Eastern European war movies, and so we wanted to make one in Texas with a fake foreign language. And that didn't go anywhere either. And then so we went back to making short films, and we made those. We made those for a long time. And during that process, in 2001, there was a story that began circulating on the internet. Originally, where we saw it it was random, like a little bit of information on a message board, just simply about saying a Japanese woman apparently went from Tokyo to Minnesota looking for the mythical fortune from Fargo, and it was lost in the wilderness. Period. And we instantly wanted more information about it. And at the time there was nothing else, and other people had different. And what we liked about it is instantly there are different theories about what happened, and like we just saw different versions of the truth build, and from there. We just partly to satiate our own, well, one to satiate our own curiosity, just because it was so mysterious, the lack of information. I think if all the information was out that came out later about it, we would have been maybe less interested in it. But there was the fantastic element, the idea of this going on a quest and this kind of mythic journey that was really interesting, because just I don't know, we grew up loving like adventure films and quest films and that sort of thing. This was something like that in a modern day setting with a female protagonist, and it just in an age where there are things are less mysterious than they were. The world is mapped out via Google Maps. Almost every kind of information you want is available on the web, although it's questionable how much of it is truthful. But it just and there's no uncharted lands anymore. So we like the idea of this kind of antiquated notion of a treasure hunt, and so from that we just kind of satiate our own curiosity, like built a backstory for this character, and we'd been to Japan as tourists and loved the country and are big fans of Japanese cinema, and then did additional research into like the office lady culture and that sort of thing. So we just not knowing what the future would be for this film at all, we just felt the need to to at least create this story, and that was 2001, 2002, and we circled back online every couple of years, and eventually information came out about the story that the true aspects of it, which basically debunked the treasure hunt aspect.
The urban legend part of it.
Yeah, and at first we were caught off guard because it was so, we'd been in our bubble with the story for so long, it was completely different from our world. And we were like, oh God, that's not what really happened. And then we were like, oh, but wait, there's all these different versions of the truth, and we like this legend version of the truth. And so we that's what drew us into it and fascinated us about it.
So we stuck with that and stopped doing any research.
Right.
Basically. Yeah. And we're just like, it was this interesting process of starting with the end of it and coming up without, we're not reporters or investigative journalism. We wanted to create a story out of it rather than like find out what was the real nitty gritty of it, and that's what we wanted to stick with. Yeah.
So then we we kept. We had so many false starts. It was a tough film to get financed. It's in 2 different languages in 2 different parts of the world, and it's weather dependent. We had to shoot in the dead of winter, and in the same way, it was important for us to actually shoot in Japan. It was important. We couldn't like be. You couldn't have a real location in one place and fake the other, and so we needed the winter in Minnesota, and we needed to actually be in Japan, and we dealt with all kinds of sketchy people over the years that wanted to compromise different. I mean, like at one point, the low point was when we had the financing like years ago, but the guy wanted to shoot Japan in Chinatown in Chicago, and it was a real, like we thought it was a joke, and it was this, and it was
when you threw the suggestion out, the room got really silent.
When we realized this is a guy with access to a lot of money who was dead serious, and so it took. And then,
so that didn't work.
Yeah, basically. So we just kept. We in the meantime, then we kept circling. So the movie just kept not happening for reasons like that, and then. We made a couple other features that were easier to get off the ground that were in English and shot in America entirely, and easier to and much lower budget, and then just kind of circled back when the time was right. So.
Did you also kind of think of it? I mean, the quest narrative is sort of a part of a lot of your movies. I mean, like Goliath is a quest of sorts.
Uh-huh.
Man searching for his missing cat. And his missing wife, in a way, and Kid Thing is a kind of adventure movie. I mean, people really should see these movies. They're very hard to describe. I mean, Kid Thing is a movie about the relationship between a tomboyish girl and the mysterious voice emitting from a hole in the ground that you never really know what it is. It could be the devil. It could be a trapped elderly woman, played wonderfully by the late Susan Terrell, who you were fortunate to work with. But did you think about Kumiko being on some level also a movie about movies and kind of in the way that Sherlock Jr. or Buster Keaton walks up into the movie screen, or the Purple Rose of Cairo, the characters walk out of the movie screen into real life, this kind of danger of loving movies a little too much.
Absolutely, and we're huge fans of both those films. I think and what I love about those, as opposed to other films that are about films, it seems kind of effortless the way they kind of meld the worlds together. And I think as opposed to other films where it's more of with a wink, it's more. I feel it's more with more of an affectation, and I like the way it kind of those movies kind of blend the fantasy and the narrative realism aspects, together perfectly. And so that was something that was appealing to us. And as we were developing the story, like all these kind of meta layers, just presented themselves. The fact that with the Coen's film that it was presented as a true story. It was like we didn't have to stretch a lot to connect to add the different layers. They just kept presenting themselves, and so we just embraced that. It was. I think that's what made it appealing to us, is that it felt natural to have these work on different levels in terms of a relationship with cinema and that sort of thing. We weren't forcing anything, and it just was a great gift that kept giving with the material.
And how did you find your Kumiko in Rinko Kikuchi? At what point in this long development process did she enter the picture?
Well, we had seen, most people that are familiar with her, Western audiences, from the movie Babel, which she won a Golden Globe and was nominated for an Oscar, and so and she was great in that, and then we went and had familiarized ourselves with some of her other work, and we really liked her choices. You could tell that there was that she was had direct, as opposed to just gigs being handed to her. There was you know, she had a sense of style with the choice. There's a really interesting Japanese film called Funky Forest. Have you ever seen that?
No, I've heard about it. It has a real cult
The name is
following.
amazing. The name is Funky. That's what drew me into the name. Funky Forest is a great name for. It's a Japanese. It's just a really weird. It's like an anthology film that's a comedy, like by a Japanese version of David Cronenberg, kind of. It's just like weird. It's just so. And she was in that, and so she got a lot of respect from us for that. But really there was not a close second. There, you know, because we obviously needed a Japanese actress, and then we did when we just to try to look into as many options. Like every other option was a pop singer that was trying to get into acting, and they were infinitely more famous than Rinko, but at least, you know, in Japan. But you know, just no one had the skills that she had, and the kind of sensibility. I mean, because I think she's great with comedy and she's great with drama. She's a great balance, and then she's also she's a big cinephile. And I think when we met her in 2008 and in LA, and she back then she had an interpreter, and we just. I mean, the main way we communicated was just talking about movies we liked, and just seeing her nod a lot, like mentioning the Dardenne brothers, and seeing her, oh, okay, she's pretty cool. And so we knew that we're using different filmmakers we liked in terms of reference for the kind of tone we wanted to go for, with this kind of balance of humor and pathos, and this kind of understated approach to her performance. And she got it instantly. I think the most we ever talked about her character was in that first meeting, and then it took several years after that to have everything fall into place with making the film. And Pacific Rim was a big part of that, which she acted out of that suddenly. We pushed back a little because of that, and it was worth it though, because there was no one that we would have that would have done it as well as her.
Yeah, the other great thing about Rinko, and I don't think she gets enough credit for, but in this film there's not a lot of dialogue from her, and especially like there's the language barrier when she gets to America. And she has a very interesting face, and she can express a lot, and she can act a lot without saying words. She has, sort of comedic timing, that sensibility, just with the physical actions that she does and the way she walks. There was this thing we nicknamed it the Kumiko shuffle, because she would the first thing we shot with her was her walking on the beach at the beginning. And we were watching her walk, and it's like, wow, is that how Rinko really walks? I like it, but and it just fit the character.
You couldn't have a stunt double do that.
No, you couldn't have a stunt double do it. And it was just like this unique way that she walks, and there's obviously a lot of her walking in the film, and we think that she developed it for the character. But either way, it was a perfect fit.
Well, she had given that basically wordless performance in the Rian Johnson's film, The Brothers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it seemed that she has a real affection for that kind of silent comedy style.
We talked a little bit about Buster Keaton when we first met her and stuff like that, and that's how we kind of communicated initially, and it took us so long to make the film that now she speaks perfect English.
Oh yeah, by the time we were shooting, she was fluent, which made directing much easier. But we encouraged her, and so she acted with her whole body, which people don't always do, and it's which seems silly, but I mean, she just really put everything into the character, and it was, and because of that, when we're actually shooting, it was really easy. It was a breeze. So.
And can you talk a little bit more about working in Japan with the Japanese cast? Because one of my favorite scenes in this movie is the scene in the library, and this guy playing the security guard in the library is so on exactly the same wavelength, and he's wonderfully deadpan. And when you think about the movie has the same tone as your other movies, even though you're so far outside of your usual zone here in terms of you're not shooting in Austin, you're not shooting in a language that you either speak or have invented, and how easy was it to were you directing mostly through a translator, or did most of the Japanese actors also speak English like Rinko? How did that work?
Well, most of our entire crew was most of our crew was bilingual. And it was when we went the year before, me and Nathan and Chris, we went to Japan to just meet different production companies, and this production company had just done Enter the Void, which is this Gaspar Noé film, which is technically insane. And we're like, oh, if they can handle that, this is going to be a breeze. And so it was the exact same crew. And so they were all bilingual, but then the cast was almost none. The security guard and a couple spoke English, but most of them did not. And part of it, we were told, like with a lot of the younger Japanese actors, that like 20 years ago they were more interested in learning English, but now Korean and Chinese is much more of a priority. So we had an incredible AD assistant director who he got the tone that we were going for, and I think that was so. And I'm so the casting was terrifying because we were really, because this film's kind of in two different chapters, and there's different acting, English speaking acting styles, but in America is very different from Japanese, which can tend to be a lot, especially on television. There can be a lot
of the actors they work on television over there, and it's that broad sort of acting.
Yeah.
So when we came there and we were trying to explain what we were doing, and this also trickles over, or same with like our locations, like we wanted a very realistic view of Japan, and when they went out to the casting folks and were describing this film, they were like, oh, they were really excited to try something different and to do this more subtle acting that they've don't get to experience much over there.
Yeah.
So we had a pretty good selection to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only time, we're really nervous, or I was nervous during casting, because that's when it was like, if this doesn't go right, this could, like, there's so many international, kind of co-production kind of films that just are a total mishmash with performances from one character to the next, and we're terrified of that. And so I was really sweating it during casting, but then we had a great casting director there, and then a great AD who was there throughout the whole audition process, and he had done the Abbas film.
Someone in Love. Yeah,
and so he knew how to do understatement. So he had the tone. I mean, I have no idea how he interpreted what we were saying, but
he was great because he wasn't like translating us word for word. He was kind of like listening to us and then talking to the actors in a way that would convey exactly what we were going for.
Yeah.
You think he was saying like Kiarostami, but from Texas?
Yeah. Exactly. And and it was. I mean, and I have to say, I think we talked more about the nuances of the performances during the audition process and the callbacks than when we were actually shooting. When we did like one day of rehearsal, but it was great. It's a testament to the team that we had. Everyone in Japan, they knew exactly the tone we were going for, and were able to express that through every aspect. And so even I feel like when we were actually shooting, it was surprisingly smooth in that regard. It was actually so much fun. So.
And then you showed up in Minnesota.
Yes.
How much of the people that Kumiko encounters along the way are professional actors? How many of them are professional actors, but people you cast locally? How many of them are just people that you found locally who aren't actors?
It was a mix. We like. I don't know. A lot of films we like, and what we like the idea of mixing professional and non-professional, just based on what I don't know, not with a mandate or anything, just based on what feels right. And we cast a good portion out of Minnesota, and I think we have Shirley Vennard, who is the old woman. She's somewhere in here in the audience, right? Can you stand up, Shirley?
She's right there.
Yeah. Oh, hello. Yeah. So the great actress Shirley played the old woman. We were
lucky to find her.
We were lucky to find her, luckily, and several other people like that. We had some happy accidents, like the hotel clerk. We couldn't find the right fit, and a PA in the office went to go get lunch at a Quiznos and came back and said, "There's this amazing owner of a Quiznos that you need to meet." Well, and also every hotel we scouted, it had an Indian or Middle Eastern owner, and but most of the people we auditioned, we had a hard time finding actors like that
There were some great people that auditioned, but it was like,
it was just not the right fit. And then this guy Ravi, his name was Ravi, and he came in, and he was and he was in his Quiznos uniform and everything. And he came in, and he was fantastic. And then we found out he worked in Bollywood for a long time, and then went to business school in Minneapolis and stayed. And so that was this nice serendipitous things like that. Nathan and I we've acted in our films just from the beginning. We've just always, when appropriate, we've cast ourselves, which can be really obnoxious, but we try to be smart about it. And then the old man in the scene with Nathan's character at the airport is our grandfather.
Oh wow!
And Brad, he's 91. And he's fantastic. And so basically, like if we cast a non-actor, it's like you cast them as themselves. You don't try to get them to have a French accent or something like that. You just make them themselves. And what you see in the movie is our grandfather Brad. And so
those were his real glasses.
Yeah, yeah. And then his riffing with the Harry Kirshner line, that was like all his Borscht Belt shtick that he just was like putting in there. And so it's a gamble when you put someone who's 91 in a movie, because up until we were rolling, the whole crew was like, this is and they're like, they don't want to be rude, but like, this seems like a really bad idea, because he has really bad hearing, because he used to work at a gun shop and didn't wear earplugs in San Francisco for like 20 years, and so he did he wasn't hearing things, and the whole crew was just like, this sucks, it's bad. And then we rolled, and he was like a big ham. So it's just like kind of knowing different people, and then also that's how we directing them based on that. Like with someone like that, we didn't give him a script because it would have blown his mind, I think, and we just gave him the parameters of what he was working, and we knew that. Something like, you just knowing when to embrace stuff and let stuff loose, like he was unfolding the map, which is ridiculous. That was his own shtick. And
was it a shtick, or was he just really having? It was a
combination. It was a combination. But I mean, we could have. I mean, I
think it was kind of a shtick, but where he opens it, it's the wrong side. That was he didn't realize that, and I had to turn it over.
Yeah. But we could have watched. I mean, maybe
that was the second longest take. There's a longer take.
Yeah, we could have gone on for like 10 minutes of him doing a Rubik's cube with the map, and it was just it wouldn't it was not the right it was not appropriate for the movie, but it was so just look with him. We would just give him we would just kind of give him the parameters to work within, and let him go. And he didn't know anything about the rest of the movie. He didn't know she was on a treasure, and he didn't know anything like that. He just knew that he was helping this woman go, and that's all he wanted to know.
That's perfect. He's in character.
That's it. Yeah. And then other people like the Ravi, the clerk. We didn't give him a script either. We just kind of put him in a role playing thing with what would you do if it was a customer service issue, but then other people it was straight off the script. So we just kind of knew when to push and pull with that sort of thing.
Well, it's an interesting question because some people, including myself, said at Sundance, that this movie feels like a slightly more mainstream, slightly more accessible film than your previous films. How much was that a conscious decision on your part? I mean, you said you could have had your grandfather for 10 minutes playing with the map. There is a scene, maybe not 10 minutes, but pretty long in Goliath of two people signing divorce papers, which I think some people love that scene, and other people are driven to climb the walls by that scene. So how much were you kind of checking yourself and saying, we want this movie to reach a bigger audience? Well,
I think I don't know, it wasn't. I think we're careful about that because we want with everything we do, we want to reach as many people as possible, but try to find some balance with making something accessible to people, but making something that's a little bit challenging, hopefully meeting halfway, and hopefully, and part of that comes with this was an infinitely bigger budget than something like Goliath, which had a crew of like 5 people, and also there's based on this film that no one in this entire audience has seen. It's a scene where people are signing divorce papers for several minutes, but it's in one shot, which
technically it's like 5 minutes.
But
people who hate it think it's about 20.
Yeah, but it's that's we like the idea of letting action kind of play out within one shot when appropriate, and also I don't know, especially right then we're like heavily influenced by Bela Tarr and Michael Haneke, I think a lot, You know, it just depends. Like that was appropriate for that film, and we didn't want to be indulgent for the sake of being indulgent, and so it was just kind of what felt right. But I mean, in general, I don't know. We like the idea of having things executed within, within a scene if it's appropriate for the film. But I mean, at the same, we want to keep making bigger and bigger films, hopefully. So.
And this story was a much, being a treasure hunt and kind of like this journey, and that particular scene and that it's the movie itself is unconventional because it's like two halves, and we're switching from subtitles in Japanese to listening to English and not having to read the screen, and different styles and stuff like that, and so it was kind of key that we kept the momentum going and not have like this 10-minute long actual import. But there was a lot of discussion on how to actually make that shift and how to kind of like keep the audience with her and understanding where we were going with it at the same time.
Yeah, that was definitely a challenge, like with the narrative structure. I mean, the 3-act structure is great, and there's, it works very, very well, but we like the idea. We've seen films where there was like the first part is in another country or some exotic place and just a quick launch pad, and they like hurry to get out of it as quickly as possible. And we like the idea of it really being 2 complete chapters where you're really immersed in her world, and structurally the first half is very cyclical, and you really get a sense of the kind of turmoil, internal turmoil she's just kind of stuck in, and then the second half is more linear. And I would like the idea of like experimenting with the structure like that, and I love the way it works in a Full Metal Jacket, which you could have very easily just done a quick first act with the training and to get to the battle stuff, but it's completely its own beast and completely its own structure, and then the second half is very linear, and that, I thought I'd always stuck with me how progressive that structure was, and that's something we talked about when trying to work out the configuration for this film.
Sort of the Full Metal Jacket of treasure hunting.
Exactly.
Well, talk a little bit about the beginnings of the Zellner Brothers. So, because Frontier, the movie that you mentioned earlier that's in the Moldovan language, it feels kind of like the greatest, like, let's make a movie in our backyard kind of adventure movie ever. It's sort of like Terrence Malick's Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I mean, it's a very hard movie to describe, but it has a lot of just make-believe in it, a lot of just crazy invention. I mean, were you guys making movies like that as kids that then kind of grew into making grown-up versions of those movies? Yeah,
we've been making home movies since we were kids, and it's just really. There was no like break between making stuff when we were 10 years old until now, just with a VHS camera, and I think that's why we got comfortable wearing different hats. I think if we were just now for the first time trying to act in our film, I'd be terrified, but it's just kind of second nature, and with both of us we're able to jump back and forth behind the camera. But it's really, when you're a kid and you start out just making stuff on VHS in the 80s, it's like, I don't know, like a lot of kids, you are doing stuff like spoofs. I think that's like the first thing kids do with a VHS camera, or when we're, and so you kind of do that, and you hate everything, or you do it and you think it's amazing, and it's the worst thing ever, and so you just keep kind of building on that. But I think we were also into magic a lot when we were little, and just like the idea of creating like not that we could do anything at all, but but we just like the idea of creating these illusions, and we're also very much into special effects, and we were really into the 1980s horror makeup superstars. We were really into them and these illusions.
Tom Savini.
And Rob Bottin and Rick Baker and those guys, and big fans of Fangoria and stuff like that. And so we would do our like crappy versions of fake blood. Sorts of just kind of creating, and that was like basically create an effect and then build a little VHS movie around that, and then and just kind of learn from our mistakes narratively for years and years, and as long as we're evolving in some way. But it was fun kind of having that kind of ignorant freedom with the stuff, because we would just do, we didn't. We didn't. On one hand, there weren't like online resources and all sorts of things like that about how to make films, which would have been great to have. But on the other hand, it was just very liberating to just make stuff having no idea what's going on, and it was more like well, like we had one where it's like, well, hey, it would be great if we could set Nathan's head on fire. And so working our way back, and that was when Nathan was like 16 or something, and we built this, we literally, like he's running around in our backyard with this, like a contraption on his head that's completely on fire, and like in hindsight, and we just have a garden hose ready to put it out, and it's like, oh, well, we're so planned, we got the hose turned on. It's like, we're so professional, and so I just think that kind of stuff was, was really a fun way to learn and experiment.
Yeah, because I mean, especially back then when there was, the tools as well were very limited. Like we didn't have computers, or, we did a lot of in-camera editing, whereas like, especially if it was the two of us just making something, we'd end the scene, run over, hit stop, rewind it to where we wanted the next shot to start. Do it all again, and I think when we wanted to add soundtrack or music, we would hold a Walkman up to the mic.
Of course.
So, but you kind of had to invent these. It was just problem solving, is what it was, and I think that's like the same way we tackle movies nowadays is our backgrounds, kind of do it yourself and figure out how to solve things. So, along with Chris, when we were trying to figure out how to do a film, in Japan and Minnesota, and on a very small budget, and make it all work and be efficient. It didn't seem overwhelming, because we were just trying to figure it out.
And you've mentioned a lot of very serious influences: the Dardenne brothers, Michael Haneke, Bellatar, Kubrick. Are there comedic influences as well, since these movies are, at least on some level, comedies also? In terms of this very dry tone.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of comedy snobs, and maybe that's not good. But I think growing up, I mean, when we were little, like, in terms of films, like, I think the films that were most, when we were very, like, in the set, I say, like, Mel Brooks he's a huge hero of ours, and Monty Python, especially Monty Python, The Holy Grail. Yeah. And that was one of my first movie experiences. I remember it was on, I was like 4 or 5, and Monty Python and the Holy Grail was on TV, and I was asleep, and I heard my parents laughing, and I went in the living room, and it was this scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail where this Black Knight is getting his arms cut off, and for a 5-year-old, it's like pretty upsetting to see this guy getting his limbs cut off, and then I'm looking at that, and it's like, and this blood splurting out, it was like kind of melting my brain, and then I look at my parents, and they're howling with laughter, and I just remember my wheels like trying to process this kind of like weird human behavior, like, that's horrible, and this is funny, and like saying, like, ha 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 ha, just jump in, and you realize that you kind of finally dial into the absurdity of that, and so that, I don't know, that was, and also the way that movie broke the fourth wall so many ways, it really like kind of blew my mind about what was possible with film, I mean those, I think that in terms of features, those are some of the most influential, and Buster Keaton is a huge influence as well, although we didn't come across him till we were older, but then I think a lot of TV it's like, I don't know, I really love Sanford and Son, and this show Get a Life with Chris Elliott, that was really good. Little Rascals, loved that, and this is also random. and then, but I think also like some of our favorite, like comic strips are some of our favorite. Like The Far Side was just like in terms of like this really subversive, but really insightful kind of comedy. I think the comedy in The Far Side was so great, and Bloom County, and I don't know.
But then, as like when you start expanding your film knowledge and you start experiencing different films, and like we always say that some of our favorite comedic moments are in films that would be classified as a drama, and like Robert Altman always has something very human and hilarious, and there's not many of his films that you would consider a flat-out comedy. You know? So. Well,
we had the screening in L.A. last month that Werner Herzog moderated, and he's my all-time favorite hero, and it was really amazing. But it was I bring that up because he talked about the comedy in his films, and his films are all dramas, but like he has some amazing like absurdist moments that just kind of give a little breather from the other stuff that's going on, and that's and I don't know, I find those are the kind of films that are some of the most appealing. And even like Kubrick, there's moments of humor in some of his really dark films. It's nice to be able to so deftly handle that kind of ebb and flow of, whether, and obviously these films lean one way more than the other, but I think that's kind of what we try to do, is find that kind of balance with the humor and the pathos. And some things we do lean much more one way than the other, but I think it kind of can keep the film interesting, and even though it's heavily stylized, it's a I don't know, it's a stylized representation of life, which has elements of comedy and tragedy everywhere.
Well, it's much more realistic to what life is. Like there's funny moments and sad moments and serious things.
It's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah. So
I think the quote I read of Werner's from that dialogue was that people laughed more in his movies than in Eddie Murphy movies. And then he said late Eddie Murphy movies.
Yes.
Clarify.
Talk a little bit about making movies in Austin, because you guys sort of appeared on the scene roughly around the same time as a lot of other Austin-based filmmakers, including people that you've collaborated with in various ways, like the Duplass brothers and Brian Poiser and others we could name that really felt like a kind of Andrew Bujalski, a kind of a new wave based around Austin as a center, and Richard Linklater was maybe the herald of that.
Yeah.
And it feels very collaborative that you guys are sort of all working together and helping each other rather than competing against one another.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I think if you ever tried to force, and also right now it's a really interesting time. There's so much amazing talent from there, and I think if you tried to force it, it could never work. But it's just happened organically, and it's only when we're doing interviews or traveling somewhere else and talking about it that we actually, oh yeah, that is something really special, and particularly now it's a really special time. But yeah, for me it was like, I went to film school at University of Texas, and it was right around when the movie Slacker came out. And we spent our teenage years in this town in East Texas, pretty conservative town, and so like Austin was the big city, and it was kind of like the scary, hedonistic kind of place. And I thought the movie Slacker felt like the most like grimy, spooky underground thing, and with Madonna's pap smear and things like that. And I was just like, I was terrified of this, but fascinated and obsessed with this film. It seemed so dangerous to me and alluring, and also it was and inspiring in that in being 17 and realizing, oh my God, you can actually make stuff that's not in New York or LA. And so that, I partly because it was a nearby school to go to, but then he was creating this film scene there that was just out of nothing. That was something really exciting, and we went, I went to film school there, and I got a film degree, and Nathan got a computer science degree, which is the more lucrative of the two degrees. And we just kept, we kept thinking, well, after we make this one movie, we'll move to LA or something like that. But then this one thing led to the next. But then in the meantime, the community really grew, and a lot of people we knew from New York and LA kept moving to Austin, and it's kind of turned into this just amazing scene, just very, very, very naturally. And it is interesting because I know people in other circles where it's more competitive, and so I think partly because everyone is, everyone that's, working in Austin, or that has, like, I went to school with Jay Duplass, and he's been in LA for a long time, but just kind of, the nice thing is everyone is kind of, they're generating their own material. It's not like they're competing for projects, so I think that's part of the reason it's so symbiotic. And then also, and everyone they're doing such different things, so it's inspiring to see other people do things, but you're not, we're not all competing to do some superhero movie or something. And
it's also removed from that machine.
Yeah.
Which, that's the one thing that when we talk to people who, think of Austin as like this mecca, or other writers that are from LA or something, like, oh yeah, you just kind of get into this, like, I have to do the same movie that makes money,
Right.
that I can sell this script or whatever, and they kind of get in that, everybody talks about the same stuff, where in Austin, half the people there are in some terrible band and making movies, and there's a lot of weird culture that's there. So the ideas that are, we're from Austin, but this movie is not an Austin movie, which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, and what was I going to say? The other thing is there's no money in Austin, and so I think that's an asset. It sucks. It sucks, but like no one's competing for the same pool of money. Like if you're to make movies, you got to get money elsewhere. So I think that also makes things like nice and harmonious. Is it like even less competitive because
you're all in the same fight.
Yeah.
When you look to the future, you said you want to eventually make bigger and bigger projects. Do you look at somebody like Linklater as a kind of someone who has maybe an ideal kind of career because he can move between studio movies and indie movies, and something as relatively big as School of Rock and something tiny like Tape or the Before movies or that kind of thing? Or are there other people whose careers you say, well, maybe that's where we'd like to go?
Yeah, I mean, we don't. I think I love. He's a huge inspiration to us, Linklater, and ideally, I think it's a perfect way for a lot of people, or like Soderbergh, to be able to hop back and forth between big and small, and really kind of curate your overall career. Just have some kind of strategy, or at least that's what it looks like from the outside. And that's, I think, how these people are able to continue to make stuff for so long. We'd love to have that kind of balance, and we love all kinds of movies. We like some of the most, obscure, strange films around. And then, it's fewer and fewer that it happens. But I want to like, big block. I mean, we'd love to do some like big action movie. We wanted because growing up, it's mostly like films from the '80s like that really inspired us. But those are the, when we got older, it wasn't until late teens that we got into international cinema or had access to international cinema. But before that, it was like just the most mainstream blockbusters that really made us passionate about about film. So
yeah, and I think talking about our shorts background and how we worked through that process and figured out what we wanted to do, we also kind of learned that certain stories require a certain length and certain budgets and that sort of thing. And there's tons of different stories that we'd like to do. Obviously, some of them would be small. Like if we had $60 million to do Kid Thing, it would not be.
It would be a bad idea for everyone.
Yeah, it would be a bad idea for everyone. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's that's the ideal thing, and we just we've always worked with our own material, which is great. That we have that we're fortunate that we have a lot of ideas for things we want to do. But I think we'd love to get into just at least. I mean, maybe we'd see how it goes. But like the idea of working with other people's material or something would be a different set of challenges that we'd like to tackle at some point.
Zellner Brothers. I think we'll stop there. Thank you very, very much for being here at the Walker to present the Minneapolis premiere of Kumiko, The Treasure Hunter.
Cool.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Scott. And thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
We'll see you in the lobby, the reception.